Welcome to Reality Night, guys. Today is a new topic for EOT, but we felt this is a very important topic that we should cover with all of you. Major reasons being, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes of running a business, and today we wanted to bring it to you up front to tell you how hard it is to run a business, and also what success looks like, and how hard you must work for your success, and at the same time make the right decisions. So we also have our EOT head. At the same time, we have a mentor as well who's going to present a video to you about a case study of two very important companies who went into the market, were very bullish about what they were doing, and they made mistakes. So we're here to learn from the mistakes. So best thing about mistakes is we have a very short life and we don't live that long enough to commit all these mistakes and learn. So being smart, we have to learn from other people's mistakes. So that's what we're going to do today. So when we look at business, sometimes at your age, you might be on Instagram, you might be seeing success with people on private jets, buying islands, flying all over the world, all the wealth, the money. But let me tell you a reality, what happens. The reality is, if you are an entrepreneur, you're not working 40 hours a week. You're working 80 hours a week. You're talking about private time on the weekend? There is no weekends. There is no Monday. Every day is a Monday for you when you're an entrepreneur. So that's the tough part, and that's the reality of being an entrepreneur. So dream big, but chase it up with action and work hard. That's the reality. And the flip side of that is what you see is success that happens. And then there's also another dream that being your own boss means you can do what you want. No, it's never like that. You always have responsibilities towards your investors, towards if your company is a publicly listed company, you are under the regulator scrutiny. So you need to do justice to the regulators, to your investors, to your country, to the economy, to whatever you're doing. So you are under a lot of pressure from all the other sides. So you're not really your own boss. You are a public figure. So remember that. Next is people beg for, you think if you're successful, people beg for your attention? Well, it's not really. The reality is, when you start off in business, you're not a famous person. You're pretty much a door-to-door sales guy, because you have to make hundreds of phone calls a day to get attention of your clients, of people who you want to sell your products to. So the success part is later, but the struggle that you have is really hard. Because you will have to get used to rejections. You will have to get used to friends not wanting to be friends with you anymore. You will have to get used to people calling you a dreamer and not doing anything. You will have to listen to naysayers. Welcome to being an entrepreneur. Now, we'll watch a video about two major companies that were listed in the press. They had all the press, all the PR, all the success, but when they fell. It was a great story. And in some of these companies, the guys who ran these companies, they are broken the law, and law enforcement's after them, and they have literally people's faith in these companies are no longer there, and they made certain decisions which costed everybody a lot of, let's say, values, money. At the same time, shareholders were lied to. So it was really fraud that happened at the top end. So today we'll discuss the case study so you guys can have a look at it and think what really went wrong. So the video will be played now so you guys can have a look at it. See you later.
Yes. So Unicorn, as I understand it, is a privately held company that has a valuation of $1 billion. So examples of unicorns are SpaceX. It's not listed yet on the stock exchange. It sells shares to private investors at a certain valuation, and based on that valuation, they calculate what the company is really worth before it goes on the stock exchange. So SpaceX is a unicorn at the moment because everybody assumes or calculates that it's worth more than $1 billion already. Airbnb was also a unicorn, but I think they've now listed.
So is Uber, no?
And Uber as well. So before they listed, they had a certain valuation, and if that valuation was estimated to be more than $1 billion, then it was a unicorn.
So what happens to these companies once they go bust, if they go bust?
Well, some have, right? Some really didn't work out well.
You remember that Silicon Valley biotech startup of a few years ago?
Which one, Theranos?
That one. Some people call it Thanatos these days. Yeah, I think that's what happened to it.
Really?
Do you know the story?
Not really. I just knew that it was very high flying and it had very important people on its board, and that convinced a lot of people that it was a great investment, but I don't really know the details.
So it's actually, there are a couple of companies in the last, years that went spectacularly bust, right? But this one is particularly interesting simply because of the scope of the fraud.
Okay.
Right? So
Interesting.
at its high point, I think around 2014, 2013, was evaluated at over 9 billion,
Wow.
which made its founder, her name was Elizabeth Holmes, is the youngest self-made billionaire in history. So just if you start there,
Okay.
That's an interesting story, right? She was in her early 30s. She was a Stanford dropout. So she checked all of those boxes of Steve Jobs, Zuckerberg, what was his name? Bill Gates. They're all dropouts from prestigious universities.
Yeah.
They're too smart to simply finish their degrees, So she checked all of those boxes. She emulated Steve Jobs a lot.
Okay.
In the manner of speaking, the manner she ran the company. But the fascinating thing about Theranos is that, first of all, it was a biotech, so not a software producer. And
Okay.
that is also quite interesting, because when you analyze how software companies start, who starts them, and with what fund of knowledge, and you compare it to Theranos. So Theranos is a biotech, which means you need to know a lot of chemistry, you need to know a lot of medicine. And for them in particular, she wanted to revolutionize blood testing. So
Okay.
these days, the last 50, 60 or however many years, if you want to do a series of blood tests, the most accurate ones that you get are from the vein.
Okay.
Right? So you can imagine that for the patient, that is not fun.
Not everybody. I still look away when I go and give blood.
Exactly. Yeah. I remember fainting at some point. They took after the third vial of blood. Just say, I'm done. Just check out for a bit. Yeah, it's really invasive, and it's definitely not the most sort of optimized way of doing medical checking, but it is the best one that we have currently. So what she wanted to do is be able to make blood tests from a single prick on the finger. So one
Wow.
drop of blood, one prick in the finger, and you'll do 300 tests, right? So in super layman terms, why do you need a lot of blood? Because with every test, you destroy a lot of blood. Of course, this is much more complicated, and if we were talking to Howard Ernovitz, he would, give you a lot more details. But the gist is you need a lot of blood because you kind of use it, right?
Okay,
so she said,
a lot of tests.
Exactly. So she said, well, you know what? No, I have this cool machine. I think she called it Edison. One drop of blood.
And it will do all the tests.
It will do all the tests.
Wow.
Right? So that was spectacular. Or mid-20s.
Okay.
So she studied chemical engineering, and I think second year, so she was a sophomore, barely dropped out. And interestingly enough, in this era of media and social media, and not only fake it till you make it, but alternative facts and stuff like that, nobody bothered, or the few people that did bother to raise the question, on which knowledge base will she build this company? Now, because if you take a look at Zuckerberg, he taught himself how to code when he was 10. What do you need to learn how to code? Well, a laptop and a Wi-Fi, hopefully.
Okay.
But for medical tests, you need a lab, man. You can't do it in your kitchen or your bathroom over the sink.
Yeah.
No, DNA splicing is going to happen, under the tab. So not only do you need a lot of equipment, you actually need a lot of knowledge. And to obtain that knowledge, well, guess what?
In your mid-20s would have been difficult.
Absolutely.
You know what always fascinated me about the company was the first time I heard about it, and I heard about the people who were on the board of directors.
Mm-hmm.
And you had two former secretaries of state.
Yeah.
You had two former secretaries of defense.
Yeah.
you had the former CEO of Wells Fargo, one of the biggest banks in the world. So I think, at least for me, I thought, well, they must know what's going on. I mean, if they are tying themselves to this company, then it really has to be able to do what it claims to be able to do.
Yeah, like Walmart. So, if Walmart backs you up, you think Walmart would
The
do
largest distribution network.
Exactly,
Anywhere.
they would do their homework,
Yeah.
right? So if they're saying here is this blood test you can do in the grocery store, basically, right?
Yeah.
Never mind the FDA, never
Never
mind
mind.
any hygiene concepts. If Walmart says this is possible, well, then who am I to question it? And of
Yeah.
course, when you see Schultz, another interesting thing about the company is anytime a doctor, so over the period of 7-8 years that they were building Theranos, anytime a doctor rose a question, because there were some Stanford physicians who were like, what's going on here? This is somewhat weird. She just got rid of them. No? Because at this point, the social media outlets and in general media outlets were backing her up to a point where she could squish a Stanford-educated MD, get rid of them and say, no, this is slander.
He's mistaken. He doesn't
He's
understand my
mistaken.
product.
Exactly.
That's one way to go about it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's super interesting. And what is also, in 2018, the company was dissolved.
Okay. So what happened? And how did that come about?
So they got caught. Yeah, they finally got caught because when they started these tests in Walmart, they couldn't deliver anymore, right? So now you oversold.
Okay.
You
Overselling.
overpromised. Exactly.
Overpromised.
Overpromised, and now you need to deliver. The problem is they couldn't deliver. Some of the tests that they were making, these tests were done on machines produced by Siemens. Right?
Okay.
So at some point you needed
So outsourced.
they were outsourced, exactly. So at some point you needed to bring the Edison and show that. Well, they didn't have it. Didn't exist.
Interesting.
Right? So people, at some point, the right people asked the right questions. And upon delivery of these magnificent tests, so at a high point, they had promised to deliver over 300 tests on one blood.
But that's interesting because when I think of the story of Tesla, when Tesla first had one of their first demos and presentations of their car, they actually just had the Tesla body of a car, but they hadn't built the technology for the platform, so what the shell of the car sits on, the engine. And they actually just use a platform from Daimler. Because at the time they still had a close connection with Daimler, and at some point I think Daimler held 10% of Tesla. So at least that could have been her Siemens corporation.
Exactly. I think that's what she was aiming at. I think she simply, in the folly of youth, I mean, there's plenty of psychologists around that claim that she's a sociopath, which is possible. I don't know that. But I'd say in the folly of youth, she got sidetracked. I think she lost perspective of the oversell and how much did she truly really oversell.
Okay.
I think she just thought, if I keep at it, somehow we will solve the problem. But the thing with medicine, or I think space exploration, but medicine in particular, if you oversell and you can't deliver, you will kill people.
That's true.
There's this story about this lady. I think there are many ladies. Yeah, many ladies and many stories. She was falsely diagnosed with cancer in one of those Walgreen Marts
tests.
Exactly, tests. A disaster for a few weeks, and then they realized potentially that blood test results are wrong.
Okay, that changes someone's...
Exactly, but you can turn it around. What if a person in recovery? You go and you get the test, and the test says it's fine.
And then you miss out on your checkups and everything else. Yeah,
exactly.
That's true.
So
serious consequences to overselling.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Absolutely. I think that the major difference for sure between overselling software and overselling an app, chances are people won't get killed. But in biotech, what Elizabeth did spectacularly wrong, instead of going after Genentech and companies like that have been doing evolutionary medical research in San Francisco for the last 20 years, I think, but BioNTech is 20 years?
Okay.
Genentech.
Yeah.
20 years old. No, she thought Steve Jobs and Facebook and stuff like that. That makes more sense.
Wow. Quite a story.
Yeah.
So what's the situation now at Theranos?
The
What's
company
happening
doesn't
now?
exist. So she went from being a owner of a $9 billion evaluated company to zero.
Okay.
The company was dissolved, as far as I remember, in 2018.
Okay.
And she and her COO are facing criminal charges. And if they're indicted, if they are found guilty, 20 years in prison.
Prison. Wow.
So very, very careful with who you con, what you con them about.
Yeah.
So, overselling and promising and not being able to, in the end, deliver.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are also comments that had she just given back the money to the investors and just closed the company, she could have potentially gotten away with it, right? Without the criminal.
Yeah, no, true. I think the important thing is to realize, when am I overselling, to actually be aware of what you're able to deliver and
Yeah.
what you're promising. So you either reduce your promises or you shut down, like you said, if you realize that the product or the service doesn't meet what
Absolutely.
you're offering to the clients.
Absolutely. And you know what? Saying I don't know is also acceptable.
Yes,
Yeah, I
true.
simply
We
don't
tried
know.
it. I mean,
we tried it. It
didn't work out. Yeah.
We learned something.
Yes.
Now let's try something else.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Indeed.
Yeah, and don't keep at it until you, in her case, probably kill a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, she overpromised, under-delivered, and on top of it was dishonest about it. Throughout, absolutely.
I think
Absolutely.
that's probably why this story really sticks out.
Yeah,
Because I think she had
Yeah.
many chances to come
absolutely.
clear
Absolutely.
and to be honest about what they could actually deliver, and she didn't. Wow.
Yeah.
So you know what? Overselling, under-delivering, and dishonesty, they actually remind me of another company.
Oh.
Yes, a local company.
Oh, really? We have a local company.
This is a home story, yes.
Which one?
Have you heard of Wirecard?
Oh yeah, that German company from like the .com era,
Exactly.
boom, 99, something like
Founded
that.
in 1999 in Eschheim in Munich.
Yeah, I heard they're having some issues.
Yes, well, Wirecard was one of the first German unicorns in the technology space, right? So we thought, let's brew something local, not just beer, Wirecard, right? So Wirecard was founded in 1999, and it was in the business of electronic payments. So basically, what they took care of is when you go to Aldi and you buy something,
Okay.
they took care of the communications and settlement between Aldi and your bank.
Oh.
So the systems that takes the information to your bank, make sure that you have enough money to pay for your groceries, takes the money off your account and pays it to Aldi. So they did all that things in the back end so that you can just swipe at the till and go home with your groceries.
Oh, very cool.
That's what they did.
And I don't have to stand in line and take cash out.
Exactly.
Or find my credit card and try to like
No.
put in the PIN.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay.
So their vision at the time was, we want a cashless society. We want everything to go via your card or via your smartphone, so that you don't carry cash anymore and everything is done by them in the background. So that's what they promised. So it's quite an interesting company. And in 2005, they found a way to list on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. And they did this in a very clever way, because there was a company that was listed on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange that had gone bankrupt, right? But it was still listed because, companies existed legally until you kill them legally.
Yeah.
So it was still there.
Yeah.
And so they then sort of merged with this company.
Took the spot. Clever.
Exactly. They took the spot and then they renamed it Wirecard.
Oh, very cool.
So they automatically found a fast route way to be listed,
That's
rather than going through the IPO way, which is the initial public offering. And that is a much more complicated route because you have to do road shows.
Yeah, there's some regulations attached
Lots of
to
regulations,
that, right?
much
Yeah.
more regulations than if you just sort of like do this reverse list policy. So that's what they did. And they started trading and they started doing work. And they raised a lot of money internationally because they had a very clever marketing strategy. They just went into the market and they said, we are the market leader, right?
Well, we create the market too, so it's
Exactly.
easy to be the leader, right?
And they said, we have superior technology. And with this kind of marketing, they got a lot of awareness and they got very big, well-known clients. They had Aldi, they had Lidl, they had a massive network. 100 airlines were signed to them. So they were growing really well. And of course, the share price went in 2003 from being under €5 to being 191 euros
In the heyday.
in their heyday,
Wow.
worth 24 billion. They were actually at one point included in the DAX 30. Now, the DAX 30 is the list on the stock exchange of the 30 largest companies in Germany. And when they entered the DAX 30, they actually became the second largest company, replacing Commerzbank
Ouch.
in the number 2 spot.
Oh.
So that's how big they were. And they're this massive valuation. So the question is, where did the valuation come from? Well, over time, they had invested in Asia,
Okay.
right?
As an emerging market strategy or what?
Exactly. So they expanded aggressively in Asia, and they reported to the investors that we're growing fantastically in Asia.
Okay.
And these are all the profits that we're making from this region. But then, because some of the markets where they went to, Wirecard itself did not have a license to operate there, they worked with third parties. And apparently these third parties were doing so well and putting money in certain bank accounts that were held in trust funds. So when Wirecard reported their performance in Germany, they said, we have 1 billion, in our bank account in the Philippines. We have 2 billion in our bank account in the Philippines. And people thought, well,
But nobody bothered to check. How would you?
it was difficult to check because they did have auditors, but the auditors sort of assumed that
It's legit.
what they get, if you get a letter or a statement from the branch, they're saying this is what we have in the bank, then you assume that
That's what
rightly
it is.
or wrongly, whether you've done your diligence properly or not, but they believed it for many years. So of course the company really, really boomed. And then I guess I can see from your face you're
What
asking me,
happened?
what happened?
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, so the company lists in 2005.
Yeah.
The first article that questioned the accounting practices that the company was using was actually a local institution. It was the German Shareholders Association in 2008. So the company is still young. It is listed on the stock exchange, but the local guys looked at some of their financial statements and sort of said, the way you're accounting for some of this stuff doesn't really make sense to us.
Yes, it's very similar to
exactly.
Theranos, exactly. Very early on, somebody sniffed something. It was weird, but it was squashed. Did they do the same?
They did the same.
Of course they did.
They immediately complained to BaFin and they said, we're being harassed
yes,
by these
they're
people.
out to get me.
They're out to get us. The haters are going to hate. The haters are hating. It's always the haters, right?
Yeah.
So these guys were told, stop harassing this company with your assumptions.
Your assumptions, exactly.
And then it sort of went away. So actually, they just kept doing exactly that. So the next big article to question this actually came in 2015. So you can almost imagine.
So 8 years
8 years later.
So nothing came out on this company for 8 years.
Nothing
Apart
major.
from go for it, this is great.
Exactly. Go for it. This is great. This is working. You're growing. Everybody wants to have a foothold in Asia. And according to your reports, you guys are growing fantastically in Asia. Right? So it totally justifies the valuation and the price. So at one point, the CEO's shareholding in the company was worth 1.9 billion.
That's an interesting sum of money.
Interesting sum of money,
Interesting
right?
sum of money, absolutely.
As an employee of a company and a shareholder to have billion-dollar status, not bad.
Not bad.
Not bad work if you can get it.
Absolutely not. So what happened? So 2008, somebody sniffs something, gets killed.
Gets killed.
And then 2015.
Another article is written.
Okay.
But this time not from Germany, but from the Financial Times. Alphabet. Have you heard or have you watched the TV show House of Cards?
Yes.
With Kevin Spacey?
Yes, I have.
Right? And Robin Wright? Well, they had a series on Wirecard called House of Wirecard.
Mm-hmm.
So in this series of articles, they investigated all these things that they also found weird and strange about Wirecard. One funny incident was when they actually questioned the existence of a certain property in Asia, which was listed as one of the company offices.
Mm-hmm.
They sent reporters there to this address.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a company office. They get there and it's actually some dude's house. Some residential property of a retired sailor.
Wow, for
And-
$1 billion company.
For a
That's
billion-dollar
pretty
valuation.
But I mean, they're saving money on real estate.
I mean, it's funny, but because the guy had no idea why these reporters were
Are
there.
even there.
So they're like, what are you guys doing here? Like, is this supposed to be Wirecard's address here? It's like, no, this is my house. And what is this Wirecard
Exactly. What
that
is
you're
this
talking
business?
about?
Yeah.
But of course, just like with Miss Holmes, it was hushed away.
Mm-hmm.
And Wirecard then organized a tour of their other offices to say, oh, that was a clerical error. That address was actually a mistake. We actually have these other offices. Please come and visit us. The reporters went down. They were shown very nice offices. And they came back thinking everything is hunky-dory.
It's a big clerical error in $1 billion company. Yeah.
Now, I also learned some very interesting news recently about what the development has been since then.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So wait, there is development
There's
since there, not
breaking-
towards the
exactly
jail.
what Wirecard was trying to do at the time was they were actually thinking of buying Deutsche Bank. and so in their haste, they hired McKinsey to advise them on how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And McKinsey, in their report, recommended that KPMG has a look at how this would work. And KPMG came up with questions for E&Y. So E&Y said, okay, we will check about all these funds, the trust funds that are in the Philippines and everywhere else, to prove that this 2 billion in the trust funds actually exists. They couldn't prove it.
Couldn't find it.
No money.
Uh-oh.
And the Philippines bank were like, we never had this money. This money never existed. So all of a sudden, the bank went from having 2 billion in a bank account to having not even a bank account. So that's when things fell apart, because they couldn't prove this money ever existed. And that was in March or so, and in June 2018, they filed for insolvency. So right now, the company is insolvent.
Uh-huh.
The court has hired an administrator to sort of manage it, the process, so damage control, to salvage what can be salvaged, to let people go or fire them. And then, of course, they're also starting criminal proceedings. So
Against the board or against the CEO? Or
board
everybody?
fired the CEO and the COO. The CEO is actually sort of under arrest at the moment.
Oh,
And the COO, he just sort of disappeared. They're looking for him. Interpol is even looking for him. So,
wow.
so, you know,
Oh, at least Elizabeth Holmes is reachable. Okay.
so Wirecard will definitely come to the movies.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
the story
For
is
sure. It's
too
epic.
exciting.
Yeah,
Right?
it's epic. Yeah. Imagine where they might find this guy. Somewhere on Mars, trying to colonize it with Musk. Who knows?
Or on some abandoned island.
Yeah.
They're sitting on the beach,
Well,
you know, with a cocktail, just waiting
Yeah.
for the cops to finally find it.
exactly. If he embezzled enough, which he probably did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so, these are the similarities that I see. They oversold what they could do, because they could actually do the payments. It wasn't as if they lied about what they could do, but they oversold it. They said we're growing much faster than they actually were.
Then they were. Yeah.
Had they just been honest about exactly how quickly they were growing, they would still be running today. But they oversold and they underdelivered. And to hide for the fact that they were not growing as fast as they were forecasting, they then started to play around with the finances, and then of course go after everybody who spoke out against them and say they are lying to us, they're tarnishing our good name, harassment, and they hired a PR company so that they could portray themselves as positively as possible in the media. But you're right, overselling, under-delivering, dishonesty throughout. I think these are the takeaways that I see, the similarities between Theranos and Wirecard. But I think both of them would make great movies.
For sure, for sure. Look, one of them already made it in a book.
Yes.
Now let's see what happens.
The next step is either
Exactly.
Netflix or Prime
Exactly.
or
Absolutely.
Prime.
Oh, absolutely, probably both. Hopefully. eventually somehow. Yeah, and imagine if Holmes ends up in jail, that's going to be really a blockbuster
Yes.
for 20 years.
Then people will really want to see the movie.
I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
Those are startups.
Okay, so now you've seen the video, you've seen what happens, you've seen the case study of these two companies. What do we take from these? What do we learn from it? Three major learnings is, it's very important when you're an entrepreneur and as an owner of a company, you are selling your company, but there are other issues. One is over-promising. Sometimes it's really important to tell your investors the bad truth, because they also should know the risk that they're investing in. They also should know what is the risk with your company. Your business, every business has a risk. What makes a business successful is how they evaluate that risk, how they spread that risk, and how they pass that hurdle, and then they do business. So over-promising, definitely not a good idea. Second, under-delivering, of course. Under-delivering is absolutely not accepted in the business world at all. No way. Because when you under-deliver, you'd be taken out by the competition. So there is no way you can run a business by under-delivering, because delivery is everything that matters in a business. Then is dishonesty. So honesty is a very important thing. I think you should give it a thought, actually. What is it being honest? It's about basic values of life that we cherish in the Western world that influences us to do better business. Because if you're dishonest, what happens at the end is, there's a saying, a very famous saying, what goes around comes around. So if you try to be dishonest with somebody, you might make 1 or 2 deals, but in the long run, you may not survive the race. Because remember, running a business is like a marathon. It's not a 100-meter sprint. It is a marathon. So always be honest, be up there, tell your risks, and investors will make a choice, yes or no. I know at the end you have to convince your investors no matter what it takes, but it's better to be honest than having a very bad discussion at the end of the journey. Because once you lose your reputation, and once the market knows what you've done, you've been dishonest, no, you can never be an entrepreneur ever again. The regulators will not allow you, so will the investors and also the markets, and people will never trust you unless you can go to another planet and run another business. Well, sorry, that doesn't work here. Now, what we'll do is also, what do you need for success? We've also learned the tough part. Now let's look at the learning part to win, to succeed in business. You need a niche business plan. Your business plan needs to have a niche, which is, what is your competitive edge over your competition? You cannot have the same product. So you need to have a competitive advantage over your competition. And then when you start off, you need a very solid business plan, which is evaluated, tried, and tested. And the business plan, it's called a white paper for startups, from where you build your MVP, which is your minimum viable product. So when you write your white paper, which is your business plan, it is very, very important that you have done your research, you've done your numbers, you know what you're talking about, because at the end of the journey, before you pitch, you have to be a subject matter expert in that industry. Now, also, a lot of people build companies. That's a very old saying. So a lot of big brands that we see today, there's famous people at the back end, but there's always done by a team of people. So one of the most important things at EOT that we teach you as well is to find your team, how to work within a team. So today you need to find your sweat team. So what's a sweat team? A sweat team is a very important factor, because these are people who don't work for money. These are people who will do anything for the company to succeed, who will do whatever you tell them to do. So go find your sweat team. To find a sweat team, you need to be convincing. You need to tell people and invite them on a journey with you. And you have to be fair to them as well, because they're also equally taking that risk with you. So go find your sweat team, people who are willing to sweat with you, to make great things happen with you, to change the world. And then you need something called perseverance. So 4 things that we need to succeed is your niche market, business plan, sweat team. The last part is perseverance, which is, all days are not glory days. And most of the days, I will tell you, 95% of the days in business is not positive. So you need to find your inner motivation to persevere these tough times. Because if you see a lot of people who've been in business for more than 30 to 40 years, you would rarely see them smile, because it has a toll on their personal life. That is why it's very important to be self-motivated and also important to learn to look on the brighter side of life, and also to fight through issues, to think big. Because at the end, we are all people. People make mistakes, but you need to have a vision, you need to think big, and you need to persevere to win. So, what we want to see from your business plan. Now, this year, this EOT, we are very particular about a few certain things. One is we'd love to see innovation. We like certain business plans which are simple ones, but this year, considering all the issues we're seeing in the world and where the world is moving on to, we know you are the future of the world. You have to think big, you have to think different. So we'd like you to go out there and innovate. Find problems that the world has still not managed to solve, and figure out a way to solve it and create an innovative product. That's what we're looking for. So we want to see innovation, absolutely sure. Then we want you, when you innovate, we also want to see that you've identified a problem clearly. So that problem solving strength is what we're looking for, because when we train you at EOT, we also train you to look at problems and have that problem solving attitude tomorrow when you go into the world. Because when you are trained from a young age to solve problems, you automatically become successful in life. So we are going to train you how to solve problems. So when you write your business plan, clearly you have to mention the problem and identify it and what you're solving. And then, of course, the detailed business plan. Your business plan has to be detailed, right from your vision story to the problem you're solving to what you've identified, your product, the market, the niche, and the financials as well, because we want to see how you would succeed. And then, now since I'm talking about financials, we'd also want to see how you've stress tested your numbers. As I've said, not all days are glory days. Imagine COVID-20 strikes, how is your business going to do? So you should stress test your business plan against all odds and show the real numbers. And then that's what should be mentioned on your business plan. And then at the end, the overall viability of the business should come too. Because if you write a business plan where you're not making money, then I don't think it is a business plan. So the viability factor is very, very important. Also, like loads of companies today, they're losing money for 10 years, 15 years, but they chase the vision to achieve something. So you have, if you have a business plan that's doing it, you have to clearly mention when is it going to be viable, how is it going to be funded, and who are you going to fundraise from? Is it the government? Is it people? And why would people give you money to do this? So you have to clearly mention the viability of the business plan. Okay, guys? So we want to see innovation, we want to see clear problem identification, we want to see a detailed business plan, and we want the business plan to be stress tested, and the viability. 5 important factors. So, last but not the least, good ideas are always crazy, as Elon says, until they're not. So, you have an idea that everybody says is crazy, work on it, look at the basics, identify the problem, go solve it, and let's all change the world together. Good luck, guys. Have a great Friday.